Looks like we almost have the case completed. It appears the defense is going to call one more witness, and then this thing is going to be in the books. So obviously, I'm watching you guys in chat, and I'm seeing the discussion, and I know there's a lot of you out there that firmly believe Melody is guilty, but you also have to think of this case in terms of reason of first of all starting from a position of presuming her innocent. Secondly, you have to also remember that the state has the burden of proof. They have the burden to prove the elements of this crime. They have the burden to prove exactly what happened, at least in terms of when it happened, where it happened, how it happened. And if they say or they hold to the jury a certain theory, then the defense has the right to hold them to that, and doubts or issues with the way they say it happened is what the jury is allowed to consider to be a reasonable doubt. Again, a reasonable doubt is any doubt in a reasonable person's mind. And in this case, as I have said from the beginning, I believe probably Melody Farris is involved in this. But the issue that's present right now is whether or not the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she did this. And since the state isn't alleging she had help, if the jury believes she did, that's a reasonable doubt as to how the state says it was done. If the jury can't figure out when this happened or how this happened, I know some of you are going to hold on to the testimony, which again, it was interesting. The defense put that witness on the stand, or that testified that he heard a gunshot at 10 o'clock. And everybody knows phone records, cell phone data puts Scott still at the lake at that time. It puts Chris across town, unless he left the house without his phone and came back for some reason. And it puts one person at the house. That would be Melody. I think the defense's idea here is we know there were fireworks. We know, and again, he says it was 9 to 10. He says it's late. It's 6 years ago. He said he wasn't certain. And unfortunately, there is no certainty that it happened between 9 and 10 when that witness said. He said he knew it was late. He thinks it was between 9 and 10, but he was laying down the bed. I think some might say, well, if he was laying down the bed, wouldn't that mean, do you really think he's going to bed on the 3rd of July between 8 and 9 at night? Or between 9 and 10 at night? Maybe he does. Maybe that's something he normally does. The defense didn't dive into that, but I think that the defense is going to say, we don't know. There's no certainty in that testimony. There's doubt as to whether it could have been later. And if it was later and there was a gunshot and Scott was on property, as they have already pointed out, that Scott had access to a gun that took the very same weapons and then claimed he's a guy who's been around guns, he's been in the military, and yet says he doesn't know that a .357 Magnum takes 38 caliber bullets. I think that's laughable. I think I saw a lot of people say that was laughable. So to me, I think that the issue here is going to come down to doubt. Does a juror, or will the jury be able to go back there and find 12 people in that room who says, I don't think it's possible that could have been Scott, or that it was Chris, or that he died on the 4th, or that he died on the 5th? What the defense is going to rely on when they make their argument to the jury is the lack of knowing, the doubt about when, the doubt about how, the doubt about where. All of that is reasonable doubt. And the state doesn't get to come into court and say it could have happened here at this time. It also could have happened here at this time. It could have been a joint thing. It could have been. They have to say Melody Farris did this at this time. They have to specifically lay out the time, the place, where it happened, because she's got to be able to present a defense. And what these attorneys are going to do is they're going to argue that there's doubt. They're not going to argue that she's innocent. They're going to argue that there's reasonable doubt and that the state has failed to meet its burden, and that it could have been Chris. It could have been Scott. It could be Melody. It could be Scott and Melody. And the fact that nobody knows, even right now, and they put the daughter on the stand to kind of lead the way into saying, hey, Even if she gets convicted, it doesn't bring my dad back. But we have no idea. You've got suspicious behavior from Scott, which the jury is not going to be able to ignore. Him standing at the top, according to Amanda, and saying that he was the way he was acting, and he kind of gives similar testimony as to how he was acting that day. The fact, again, like I said, he comes. Melody's there till she gets to the lake around 12 or 1. Scott comes back to the house, says there was no fire burning. The experts have suggested that this fire had to be burning for a very long time in order to have incinerated the body to the degree that it was. So the issue at hand comes into, again, the questions. So this is one of those cases where it will be very interesting, because if the jury were to look at it as the law would require the jury to look at it as, and say, is there a reasonable doubt in a reasonable juror's mind as to the guilt of Melody Farris? The answer to that question would be yes. However, by the same token, is it likely that Melody was involved in this? Maybe even did this? Somehow got Scott involved to a degree? Yes. And it's possible that but has the state presented beyond a reasonable doubt that she in fact did that? No. And will the jury feel okay locking her up for the rest of her life, while knowing that will shut down any possible potential investigations from someone else? I don't know. I don't know, because I think there is a lot of other people with motives. There's a lot of other people that had the even potential ability to do this thing, and the fact that exists, and that doubt would exist in this situation, is going to be something that, if a juror is following the law, as a lot of jurors will, when they get back to that jury room, they're going to say, I still don't know what happened. I can't figure out what happened. Now, there's a few things that, again, I see you guys making your arguments, and I could see where the jury could run off and say, as Mary Ann says, why did she top off her Straight Talk wireless burner phone using Gary's Bank of America? Because he was dead. Or did she get a hold of his, or did she have the credit card for some reason that we don't know about? That's a possibility that she did that. She found his wallet, she got it, and she did that. But the question would be, if you knew you just killed your husband, why would you do something so unusual? So that in and of itself creates a revert, again, is doubt, because it says that's unusual. Why would you do that? If she knows she did this, why would she do that? Unless Gary had given her the credit card for a particular reason, unless her and Gary were teaming up again, because, again, as you heard from Amanda and you've heard from other people in the family, they had an unusual relationship. They had a relationship where they fought, where they didn't necessarily interact with each other, but Gary loved her, and Gary would take her back. She took $50,000 from the man, and he took her back. So we don't know. Again, that is not definitive proof of anything, because once you start looking at everything that's surrounding the situation, you just don't know. You don't know what was happening, when it was happening, and how it was happening. And then you run into the problem that if you're going to believe that this crime happened inside the house, and that's what the state is alleging, because there was a bullet found in the house, and unless they're going, and this is the problem with the state adopting Rusty and then adopting Scott and all the other things around this, is the bullet can't be explained, because either it happens in the house or someone else is involved. Because if it happens down by the burn pile, or why does the bullet end up in the house where it did? That is doubt in and of itself. That's confusing to the jury. That's confusing to anyone. And that's going to be the arguments that the defense is going to make to this jury. That's why the defense is putting her on the witness stand, because they're not making a case of actual innocence. They're not saying they proved her innocent. They're saying that they proved that the state doesn't have a case that meets the legal standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And they're going to ask that jury to go back there and follow the law. That's what they're going to do. And they're going to use Amanda Farris to say, listen, you heard the young lady. She says she's obviously willing to accept a guilty verdict if that jury finds them guilty. But at the same point, if the jury doesn't believe they have a basis for a guilty verdict, she also says it doesn't bring my daddy back to send my mom to prison. just to send someone to prison. Do it right. Do it with the law, base it on the law. And based on what we've seen so far, I don't believe the state has met that standard. They have a case with too many questions, but we'll see. We will see. We will see what happens. It's going to be a very, very interesting case. So we're a little bit delayed. They're back now, and what we're going to be seeing now for the rest of the afternoon is some of the most important parts of a criminal trial. This is what you call the charge conference. This is where the law gets discussed. It gets decided what the jury is going to hear as far as instructions go. And these can make or break. What happens now can make or break a case in what the jury is charged with and how the lawyers are going to be allowed to argue when they have their closing arguments on Thursday. As you heard, it sounds like they're going to be having an expert come on tomorrow. And I have a feeling that expert, guys, that expert is a fire expert. And that expert is going to tell you that fire had to burn. That's what I think they're bringing. And when they put that expert on, and we find out that fire had to burn for multiple days, obviously it means that when Scott Farris says he didn't see a fire still burning on Saturday morning, I mean, think about this for a minute. You got a roaring fire at 11 o'clock at night, and he says there's no sign of a fire. He didn't notice it on Saturday. He wants no parts of it. He comes back, he tends to the animals, no sign of a fire. That is problematic, and the defense is going to jump all over that. That's what's coming up tomorrow. Then we're going to have Wednesday off, and then we're going to be back on Thursday for closing arguments. And I assume the jury will get a little bit of deliberation time, and we'll probably have a verdict Friday afternoon, if not into Friday evening, because that's what juries do when there's a Friday coming up. They don't want to be here for the weekend. They don't want to come into the next week, and there's going to be every possible chance that the jury could come to a verdict. Now, do understand this. The rule of thumb for deliberations is going to be on this particular trial. It's every 8-hour day that you have of testimony, it's 1 hour of deliberation. So just to get through this case, because they've had, now some of these days were shorter, we're going to say probably expect 13 to 14 hours of deliberation. So maybe we get a couple of hours on Thursday, and then we're going to have maybe 8 to 12 hours. So that's why I say late Friday night, we could have a verdict if the judge lets them go past 5. If he doesn't, they either bring them back Saturday or Monday, and we finish up deliberations by then. If it starts to go beyond that, then we're in territory where we could say this is an unusually long deliberation. So that's what we're going to be watching for. Anyways, with that said, let's jump into the courtroom. Let's pick up with the charging conference, see what's going on with that, see what the attorneys have to discuss, and go from there. I'm going to start a poll, see where we're at here. I have a feeling a lot of people think she's guilty, but the question is, what I want you to think about when you answer this poll is, do you believe the state has met the burden, has met the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Not do you personally think she's guilty, but do you really believe the case as it exists right now, without that expert testifying tomorrow, do you believe they have met that standard? Because that is going to be the question before the jury. And that's what I'd like to hear from you guys on. Anyways, with that said, we're going to jump back into the courtroom and check out what's going on.
Now, you have